The Tatshenshini River, flowing from British Columbia into Alaska after merging with the Alsek, is one of the finest wilderness paddling experiences in the world. As bold as that statement is, boaters who have been there have no doubt. The river flows through a surreal landscape that boasts dense forest, bizarre mushrooms, fields of wildflowers, and broad valleys hemmed in by craggy mountains. Massive glaciers calve blue icebergs into green meltwater lakes, and snow-capped peaks tower to 15,000 feet. Running through it all is the Canoeist Highway, a silt and salmon-laden river that thunders through a canyon, then braids itself into a spaghetti plate of channels. And walking its banks, swimming its rivers, and eating the abundant berries and salmon, the mighty grizzly bear roams free. Only 40 permits are issued each year for this exquisite river, and the logistics of putting together a trip 1,500 miles north of the U.S. border are formidable. Just getting there takes 4 long days. For most boaters, it is a once-in-a-lifetime event, an opportunity to experience a northern wilderness river on a grand scale. 14 friends from Oregon, Washington, and Alaska paddled and rowed 4 rafts, 3 canoes, a kayak, and an inflatable kayak on the Tat for 10 days in August of 2007. We all agreed that this was the finest river trip any of us have ever experienced. Both the river and the weather smiled on us, and the images that follow represent a small slice of what we saw. This wasn't just travel time to be endured. We looked forward to the sights we'd find along the way, and we weren't disappointed. Liard Hot Springs Campground, a welcome break after 3 hard days on the road, was like a spa in the middle of the wilderness. A wonderful part of this trip was the wildlife we encountered along the highway. A subspecies of bighorn sheep, called stone sheep, gave us up-close and personal views. This ewe seemed especially interested in our driver. We kept a close watch for caribou as well, though they were a bit more elusive. Still, we managed to see a few as they ran for cover. There were several sightings of moose and brief glimpses of black bears. The biggest treat, however, was a species that seemed quite out of place in the dense forest: bison. Several herds of bulls, cows, and their calves all seemed quite unconcerned with the presence of cars and people. They were all too busy taking advantage of the easy grazing along the road. After spending the night in Whitehorse, we picked up Rudy, our amiable shuttle driver. We also collected one paddler from Anchorage. and 2 others who flew up from Portland. It was a very full van, and we still had to drive over 150 miles to the put-in at Dalton Post. In addition, we were required to cross over into Alaska to clear customs, then back through Canadian customs on the way to the put-in, adding 120 miles to the drive. Unknown to us beforehand, Canadian customs would not allow Rudy, a Canadian citizen, to drive our U.S. vehicle without a U.S. citizen on board. I had no choice but to return to Whitehorse with Rudy, then hire him to bring me back in his own van. It was a very long day, but we were there, on the shore of the fabled Tatshenshini River. After the trailer was unloaded, I left with Rudy on the shuttle, while the others organized the camp in preparation for an early launch. As a final measure, they set up an electric bear fence to protect the food. It was a necessary precaution, as bears frequent this area. 3 were seen around camp that evening. Preparing the gear and boats for a trip of this caliber is a lengthy and tedious process, no matter how many times one has done it before. Every item seems indispensable at the put-in, but finding a place for every one of those items in the boats is a challenge. Eventually, however, the bits and pieces get shoehorned in or strapped on, and after a safety pep talk, all that's left to do is exactly what we've come so far for: get in the boats and paddle. The river was at a medium level for this August launching, and its heavy load of silt made reading it difficult. The canyon, coming up in a half hour, with its Class 3 and 4 rapids, would act as a kind of portal we had to negotiate in order to reach the Alaskan Coast Range, the feature that makes this river so incredibly beautiful. I decided to send the oared rafts ahead in case there was a long swim, which would put them in a better position for a rescue. The rafts would be followed by myself in an IK, Russ in a kayak, and the rest of the boats. The canyon on this river also acts as a filter, weeding out those not up to the challenge. Good communication, rescue skills, and teamwork are mandatory. Our group proved they were made of the right stuff. Finally, it was time to buckle up and get down to business. This proved to be a hole that was better left alone, but the stable shredder raft and a lot of high siding finally got Carl and Joanne out of trouble. The canyon's rapids were not extremely difficult or threatening, but they were continuous, and the canoes had to stop frequently to bail. It would be very unwise to take this stretch of water lightly, for a swim at the top of a long, rocky rapid in 40-degree water would be disastrous. The canyon's rapids provided a fun challenge for the heavily loaded canoes, and even though we had one close call and another brief swim, a well-placed raft made for a quick rescue. I think we all lamented the fact that the big action was over so quickly. After the canyon, we had another 24 miles to paddle to our campsite at Sediment Creek. Potable water is scarce on the Tat, limiting the number of camping areas. There were several streams coming in on River Right, so we used a lot of discussion and a bit of heavy thinking to choose the right one. Bill's GPS skills helped a little too. Toward the end of the day, we found the right stream, complete with numerous tent sites, and we claimed it all for ourselves. It was a wild and beautiful setting, one that fully committed us to the rest of the river. Up went the big group tarp, the electric bear fence, and we were home. This was our first layover day, and the sunny blue skies made a hike to the alpine and tundra far above the river an irresistible opportunity. After a riverside breakfast, we hit the trail. We started up Sediment Creek toward a deep canyon. Along the way, there were ample signs that wolves frequently used the route as well. Closer to the canyon, there were numerous grizzly tracks, and we prudently decided not to go there. Leaving the river, the trail entered a beautiful aspen forest, filled with a variety of colorful mushrooms, shade-loving flowers, and brightly colored berries and leaves. It was a shady respite for what we knew lay ahead, and we stopped frequently to take pictures and enjoy the cool environment. After breaking out of the forest, the trail continued up the steep mountain. Full exposure to the sun made for some sweaty hiking and frequent rest stops, but no one was complaining. The path was still well defined at this point and led past some interesting rock formations. Some of us elected to stop well below the ridgeline to enjoy a 180-degree view of the river corridor. We could see our route from where we'd put in to mountains that were at least another day's paddle downstream. It was becoming clear that all we'd heard about the beauty of this river was true. There was also a good view of the slough from which we took our potable water. It was made by beavers damming a small side stream. Looking at Sediment Creek far below, it was disturbingly clear just how vulnerable our camp was to a flash flood. A camping area just upstream would have offered more protection. We just had to hope the good weather would hold. About half the group elected to continue to the top of the ridge, a difficult climb that afforded more expansive views, including a peek at the wild country to the north of the Tatshenshini. Even though we missed the height of the flowering season, the tundra still offered a set of wildflowers not present at lower elevations. Back at camp at the end of the day, we were presented with a beautiful rainbow that offered us hope for continued fine weather and even greater things to come. The scenery on the Tat begins modestly, the grandeur increasing every day until at last one becomes jaded, unmoved with vistas that are unmatched on any other river. It was a hazard we gladly endured. It was a 31-mile paddle to Towa Creek, and we averaged a fast 8 miles per hour. This stretch is famous for strong upstream winds, but today they were off duty. We made it in plenty of time to put up our big group tarp before a violent but brief gust of wind, and to enjoy a leisurely dinner. Afterwards, we put all our food items inside the electric fence, then sat back and enjoyed a quiet evening with sunshine, flowers dancing on the breeze, and, at the end of the day, another rainbow. We were twice blessed. Day 4 was another travel day, an easy 3 hours of paddling among glacier-clad mountains that shone like jewels in the bright morning sun. We anticipated having to negotiate braided channels and tricky currents on our way to Milk Creek, where we planned for another layover day. We also expected numerous merging rivers to increase the size of the Tat several-fold. It was also on this day that we were transported into the most scenic part of the trip, made so by the highest range of coastal mountains in the world. The Alsek is the only river that cuts through them, and there were glaciers everywhere we looked. At one location, there were over 20 in view at the same time. Strong currents over shallow gravel beds made for some tricky maneuvering, and it took considerable effort to get a grounded raft back in the current. But there were also occasions when the boats seemed to fly, and we made excellent time on our way to Milk Creek. We stopped on a gravel bar and made use of maps and GPS coordinates to try to determine where we were. I had chosen the campsite on the downstream side of Milk Creek, and for some reason, there was considerable discussion on exactly where that was. Well, okay guys, it's pretty clear to me. Camp's right over there. Time for the flagship to lead the way. The steep terrace made for a bit of work to get all our gear up to the tent sites, but the fantastic scenery and clear weather made it all worthwhile. There were huge mountains on all sides of us, and we read about a great hike up to the face of the glacier that forms Melt Creek. After dinner, we discussed plans for the next day, and everyone seemed eager to try to reach the glacier. Then, relaxing in camp, we discovered we weren't the only ones calling Melt Creek home.